Look into a mirror. The face staring back at you feels normal, familiar, and completely human. But what if that reflection is only the last remaining version of a much bigger story? Thousands of years ago, another face could have looked back from the darkness. A face almost like yours, but not exactly the same. The eyes would have carried thoughts. The hands would have created tools. The heart would have known fear, hunger, love, and survival. This was not a creature from a myth or a monster hiding in the wilderness. This was another kind of human. For a long time, Earth was not owned by one version of humanity. We shared this planet with relatives who walked through forests, crossed frozen landscapes, and gathered around fires under the same stars. They had their own stories, their own struggles, and their own fight to continue existing. But today, those voices are gone. Their footsteps disappeared thousands of years ago, leaving only fragments buried beneath the ground. Out of all the different humans that once existed, only one survived. Us. And that leaves behind one haunting question. Why? Before skyscrapers reached into the clouds, before nations drew borders across maps, and before humans recorded history with words, the world looked completely different. It was a planet where humanity had many faces. In Europe and parts of Asia, powerful Ice Age survivors known as Neanderthals adapted to a frozen world. Far away, mysterious Denisovans carried secrets that scientists are still trying to understand. On isolated islands, smaller humans like Homo floresiensis built lives in environments unlike anywhere else. These were not failed attempts at becoming us. They were successful humans who survived thousands of generations. They hunted dangerous animals, learned from their surroundings, and passed knowledge from one generation to another. Some evidence suggests ancient human relatives were capable of behaviors much more complex than people once imagined. The deeper we dig into the past, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. We were not the beginning of humanity's story. We were only one branch of a much larger family tree. But if these other humans were intelligent, adaptable, and strong enough to survive impossible worlds, what happened that they could not overcome? Imagine the life of the last Neanderthal, not as a scientific discovery behind glass, not as a skull in a museum, but as a living person. Imagine waking up each morning and noticing your world slowly changing. The faces you grew up with are becoming fewer. The voices around the fire are becoming quieter. The hunting groups that once filled the valleys are disappearing. You do not know that thousands of years later, another type of human will find your bones and try to understand your story. You only know that something is changing. A new kind of human is spreading across the land. They look similar, but they are different. They bring new ideas, new tools, and new ways of surviving. Maybe there was curiosity between both groups. Maybe there was cooperation. Maybe there was competition. The truth is buried deep in time. But somewhere in those forgotten years, the balance changed. The world that once belonged to many kinds of humans slowly started becoming the world of only one. Their disappearance was not like the dramatic endings we imagine. There was no single moment when the sky turned dark. No final battle recorded in history. No last message carved into stone explaining what happened. Instead, it was a slow fading. A group becomes smaller. A generation leaves fewer children behind. A language is spoken for the final time with nobody realizing it will never be heard again. That may be the most haunting part of their story. They probably never knew they were disappearing. The last of them may have watched the sunrise without knowing they represented the end of an entire human journey. For thousands of years, their existence was completely forgotten. Their memories disappeared, their names disappeared, and everything they experienced seemed lost forever. But the earth kept small pieces of their story hidden. The story disappears back into the shadows. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Drop your country below. I want to see how far this lost history travels. And if you believe the forgotten stories of our past deserve to be remembered, subscribe and become part of the Black Time Capsule. Bones buried underground. tools left behind, ancient traces waiting silently until another human species finally discovered them. And when we finally uncovered those pieces, they changed the way we saw ourselves forever. Humanity was never a straight road leading only to us. It was a complicated story filled with different paths, different survivors, and different versions of what humans could become. The discovery of these lost relatives forced us to ask deeper questions. Were they really so different from us? Did they think about their future? Did they wonder about the stars above them? Did they feel the same emotions we feel today? The more we learn, the harder it becomes to separate them from us. Maybe the greatest mystery is not simply why they disappeared. Maybe the greater mystery is why we survived when they did not. To understand that, we must travel back into the forgotten world of our ancient relatives and meet the other humans who once called Earth home. For most of history, humans believed we were the only ones of our kind. We looked at ourselves as a final masterpiece of evolution, the single species that rose above everything else. But buried beneath ancient soil was evidence that challenged that belief. Hidden inside caves, frozen landscapes, and forgotten places were remains of humans who lived completely different lives before our world began. They were not imaginary creatures. They were not early versions waiting to become us. They were separate human groups with their own journeys. The first time people saw their ancient bones, many did not understand what they had discovered. The idea that another type of human once existed felt almost impossible. But piece by piece, the evidence revealed a forgotten truth. Earth was once home to a much larger human family. Different kinds of humans were surviving at the same time, each shaped by their own environments and challenges. They were building their own stories while our ancestors were building ours. And among all these lost relatives, one group will become the most famous because they were so close to us that their disappearance still feels personal. They were the Neanderthals, the powerful survivors of the Ice Age. For a long time, people imagined them as simple, unintelligent beings, but modern discoveries have changed that picture. These humans lived through some of the harshest conditions our planet created. They survived freezing climates, hunted large animals, and adapted to dangerous environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bodies were built for strength, but their story was not only about physical power. Evidence suggests they created advanced tools, cared for members of their groups, and may have expressed symbolic behaviors. Imagine standing face to face with one of them thousands of years ago. You might not see a monster. You might see another person looking back. Someone who understood survival. Someone who knew family. Someone who had memories and experiences you would never hear. But even after surviving ice ages and countless dangers, the Neanderthals eventually disappeared, which creates a disturbing mystery. How could a human group strong enough to defeat nature itself fail to survive what came next? But Neanderthals were not the only lost humans. Far away in Asia existed one of the most mysterious members of our ancient family, the Denisovans. Unlike Neanderthals, who left behind many fossils, Denisovans were discovered through tiny fragments that carried a massive secret. A small piece of bone revealed the existence of an entire human group that had been missing from history. It was like finding one sentence from a book and realizing there was an entire lost library waiting to be discovered. Scientists learned that these mysterious humans lived across parts of Asia and even passed some of their genetic legacy into people alive today. Yet so much about them remains unknown. What did their faces look like? What stories did they tell? What kind of world did they create around themselves? The Denisovans remind us that there may still be chapters of the human story buried somewhere beneath our feet. But while they remained hidden in fragments, another discovery on a distant island would reveal a human unlike anything scientists expected. On the island of Flores, researchers discovered a small ancient human that would become known as Homo floresiensis, sometimes called a hobbit. They were much smaller than modern humans, but their discovery carried a huge message. There was not only one way to be human. For years, people believed intelligence and survival had to follow one path, becoming more and more like us. But these small humans challenged that idea. They survived in their own environment, created tools, and built a life completely separate from the rest of humanity. Across the ancient world, different human groups were proving that evolution was not a straight ladder with us standing at the top. It was more like a tree with many branches growing in different directions. Some branches were strong. Some lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. But eventually, almost every branch disappeared. The question became harder to ignore. If all these humans found ways to survive, why did only our branch remain? The more we discover about our lost relatives, the harder it becomes to see them as strangers. They were not just fossils or names written in science books. They were living beings who experienced a world we can barely imagine. They woke up, searched for food, protected their groups, and fought against the same dangers that challenged our ancestors. Somewhere in the ancient past, many versions of humanity shared the same planet. Different faces, different abilities, different stories. But then the balance started to change. A new force began spreading across the world, a human species with new strategies, stronger connections, and the ability to reshape almost every environment it entered. That species was us, Homo sapiens. And when our journey crossed paths with the other humans, the world would never be the same again. The next mystery is not just why they disappeared, but what happened when different kinds of humans finally came face to face. For thousands of years, different versions of humanity lived their own separate stories. Across mountains, forests, frozen lands, and open plains, each human group fought against nature in its own way. The Neanderthals mastered the cold environments of Europe and Western Asia. The Denisovans survived across mysterious landscapes that scientists are still uncovering. Other ancient humans adapted to their own corners of the world. But eventually, something happened that would change everything. A new human group began moving farther than ever before. They crossed unfamiliar lands, followed changing environments, and entered places already occupied by other humans. That group was Homo sapiens, our ancestors. But this was not the arrival of heroes entering an empty world. The lands they reached already had history. They already had families. They already had survivors who called those places home. For the first time in thousands of years, different versions of humanity would look into each other's eyes. The greatest meeting in human history was about to begin. But one question remains unanswered. When these different humans finally met, did they see relatives, strangers, or rivals? Imagine that first encounter. Somewhere in the ancient wilderness, two groups notice each other from a distance. They look similar enough to recognize something familiar, but different enough to know they are not exactly the same. One group carries traditions passed down for generations. The other brings new methods of survival. We may never know the exact emotions of that moment. Maybe there was fear, maybe curiosity, maybe both. For years, people imagined the meeting between Homo sapiens and other humans as a simple story of conflict, but reality was likely far more complicated. There may have been moments of cooperation. There may have been exchanges of knowledge. There were even connections close enough that traces of ancient relatives still remain in some human DNA today. This was not just a story of one group replacing another. It was a story of contact between different branches of the same human family. But even when families meet, survival does not always become easier. The ancient world was not a peaceful paradise with unlimited resources. Every group needed food, shelter, and safe places to raise the next generation. Climate changes transformed landscapes. Animal populations moved. Survival became a constant challenge. When different human groups shared the same environment, they may have also competed for the same resources. The difference between survival and disappearance could come down to small advantages repeated over thousands of years. A slightly better tool, a larger social network, a better way of sharing information, a faster ability to adapt when the world changed. Homo sapiens were not necessarily stronger than everyone else, but our ancestors carried skills that helped them expand across different environments. Slowly, the balance between human groups began to shift. The world that once supported many kinds of humans started moving toward a future where fewer remained. But was this because we defeated them, or because the world around them changed faster than they could? The disappearance of our ancient relatives was probably not caused by one simple event. History is rarely that clean. There was no single moment when one human species instantly replaced another. Instead, it may have been thousands of small moments building over time. Some groups may have been absorbed through interbreeding. Some may have lost the struggle against environmental changes. Others may have slowly declined as their populations became smaller. Imagine the last generations watching familiar faces become fewer each year, not knowing they were witnessing the closing chapter of an entire human story. To them, it was not extinction. It was daily survival, finding the next meal, protecting the next child, making it through another winter. But from our view thousands of years later, we can see the bigger picture. A world filled with many humans was slowly transforming into a world with only one. And that is what makes this chapter of history so haunting. The rise of Homo sapiens was also the fading of our closest relatives. Our success and their disappearance happened side by side, leaving behind questions we may never fully answer. Were we simply better adapted to a changing world? Were we lucky? Or did our expansion make survival harder for everyone else? The truth may be a mixture of many things, but one fact remains. After millions of years of different human species existing on Earth, something changed when we arrived. The other voices of humanity began to disappear one by one. The fires that once burned across ancient landscapes slowly went out. But the most mysterious part is that there was no dramatic ending, no recorded final moment, no last goodbye, just silence. So how does an entire type of human vanish from Earth without anyone noticing? When people imagine extinction, they often picture a dramatic ending, a sudden disaster, a final battle, a moment when everything changes forever. But the disappearance of our ancient human relatives was probably much quieter and far more haunting. There was no single day when the world woke up and the other humans were gone. The forest did not become silent overnight. Their fires did not all disappear at the same time. Instead, their story faded slowly across generations. A group that once had many members became smaller. A place that was once filled with familiar voices became empty. Children grew up seeing fewer people who looked like them. The world changed so gradually that they may not have understood what was happening. To them, they were not a dying species. They were families trying to survive tomorrow. And somewhere in those forgotten years, there may have been a final generation carrying the memories of an entire human world that was about to disappear forever. Imagine the last Neanderthals standing at the edge of a changing world. The valleys that once held many groups are quieter now. The familiar paths walked by ancestors for thousands of years no longer carry the same footprints. The stories told around the fire are slowly being lost because there are fewer people left to remember them. This individual would not know they were the last chapter of a long history. They would not know that thousands of years later, another human species would discover their remains and search for answers. They would simply experience a world becoming emptier. Maybe they wondered why neighboring groups no longer appeared. Maybe they searched for others and found only abandoned places. That is a tragedy hidden inside extinction. It is not just a loss of a species. It is a loss of every memory, every relationship, and every moment that species experienced. A whole way of seeing the world disappeared. But why did it happen? That question has followed scientists for generations. The answer is not as simple as one human defeating another. The ancient world was filled with pressures coming from every direction. Climate shifts changed environments that some groups depended on. Smaller populations made survival more difficult. Competition may have increased when different humans needed the same resources. Over time, even small disadvantages could become impossible to overcome. A group does not need to disappear all at once. It can happen slowly, through fewer births, fewer survivors, and fewer communities strong enough to continue. Some ancient humans may not have completely vanished immediately. They may have joined with other groups, leaving pieces of themselves behind in ways nobody understood at the time. Their ending was not a single closed door. It was a long and complicated transformation. For thousands of years after they disappeared, the world forgot them completely. Their stories were not written down. Their names were not passed through generations. No monument was built to remember the last Neanderthal or the last Denisovan. They became shadows hidden beneath layers of earth and time. Then, thousands of years later, we started finding clues. A bone fragment inside a cave, a tool left behind, ancient DNA carrying messages from people who could no longer speak. Each discovery was like a whisper from another human world telling us, we were here too. Slowly, the image became clearer. We realized humanity's past was much stranger and more emotional than we ever imagined. We were not discovering monsters from a forgotten age. We were discovering relatives we never knew we had. And perhaps the most surprising discovery was still waiting. Because even though these humans disappeared from the world, they did not completely disappear from history. Their bodies were gone. Their communities were gone. Their languages and traditions were lost forever. But hidden deep inside living people today are tiny echoes of those ancient encounters. A reminder that the story between us and the other humans did not end with extinction. It continued in a way nobody expected. The line separating them from us became much thinner than we once believed. The lost humans were not only buried beneath our feet. In a strange way, pieces of them survived inside us. And that raises an even bigger question. If part of them is still here, did they truly disappear? For thousands of years, we believed extinction meant the end of a story. When a species disappeared, we imagined everything about them disappeared too. Their lives ended. Their memories vanished. Their place in history became nothing more than fossils buried beneath the ground. But the story of our ancient human relatives revealed something far more surprising. The other humans did not leave behind only bones, tools, and forgotten traces. They left behind something much closer to us. Something hidden where nobody expected to find it. Inside the bodies of some people living today are genetic echoes from humans who walked the earth tens of thousands of years ago. A tiny connection to a world that existed before recorded history. The Neanderthals and Denisovans may no longer walk beside us, but pieces of their ancient journey continue forward. The humans we thought were completely gone had left fingerprints written inside life itself. And suddenly, the question changed. Maybe the mystery was not only about how they disappeared, but how part of them survived. When modern humans expanded into new territories, the meeting between different human groups was more complicated than a simple story of replacement. They did not always remain separate. Some of our ancestors and these ancient relatives had children together, creating connection that would travel across thousands of generations. The evidence was hidden in our DNA, waiting for science to become advanced enough to discover it. Imagine what that means. A meeting between two people in a forgotten landscape thousands of years ago could leave a mark that still exists in someone alive today. A moment that nobody recorded. A name that nobody remembers. A life that disappeared from history still found a way to continue. The ancient world was not divided into a simple battle between us and them. The story was far more human. It was filled with encounters, survival, adaptation, and connections that blurred the line between different branches of humanity. This discovery changed how we look at the lost human forever. They were not just failed versions that disappeared while we succeeded. They contributed to the larger story of humanity. Their existence became part of what shaped the world that followed. The idea that they were completely separate from us began to break apart. Somewhere in our distant past, different human worlds cross paths, and those moments still echo today. But this also creates a strange feeling. The faces that might have seemed unfamiliar thousands of years ago were not the faces of strangers. They belonged to relatives, different but connected. Perhaps this is why looking at realistic reconstructions of ancient humans feels so powerful. We recognize something familiar, yet something different at the same time. It forces us to face an uncomfortable truth. The boundary between the humans who survived and the humans who disappeared was never as clear as we imagined. Think again about the lost Neanderthal. For a long time, we picture that individual as a final ending of a lost people. The last breath, the last heartbeat, the closing page of an ancient story. But maybe that ending was never so simple. While their communities disappeared and their way of life vanished, small pieces of their existence continued into the future through connections with our ancestors. They would never see our cities. They would never know our technology. They would never understand the world humans eventually created. Yet, in a way, a part of them traveled with us into that future. Their story did not continue through monuments or written history. It continued quietly, hidden in the very thing that makes us alive. Maybe the most haunting part of this discovery is what it says about ourselves. We often imagine humanity as a story about one species rising above all others, a single winner standing at the end of a long competition. But the truth is more complicated. We are not just the survivors of history. We are also the result of everything that came before us. The lost humans are not only shadows in ancient caves or faces reconstructed by science. They are reminders that the human story was once much larger than we knew. When we look into the past, we are not looking at something completely separate. We are looking at family. And when we look into the mirror today, maybe we are not seeing only ourselves. Maybe we are seeing the last traces of every human who came before us. Stand in front of a mirror and look closely. The person looking back represents the only human species left on Earth. The last branch of a once much larger family tree. For most of our lives, this feels normal because this is the only world we have ever known. We walk through cities filled with billions of people who all belong to the same human species. But thousands of years ago, that mirror could have shown something very different. There were other faces, other eyes, other versions of humanity experiencing the world in their own ways. They were not waiting for us to arrive. They were already living their own stories. They survived harsh landscapes, created solutions, raised families, and fought against the same forces of nature our ancestors faced. Then, slowly, the world changed. One by one, those other human paths disappeared until only ours continued. The mirror we look into today does not just show success. It carries the memory of everything that was lost along the way. Imagine if the lost Neanderthal could see the world today. Imagine showing them our buildings reaching into the sky, our machines crossing oceans, and our voices traveling instantly across the planet. Would they see something completely unfamiliar, or would they recognize the same curiosity that once helped them survive? Behind all our technology, we are still humans searching for answers, protecting the people close to us, and trying to understand our place in the world. The distance between us and our ancient relatives may feel enormous, but the emotions connecting us may be much closer than we think. The last Neanderthal never knew their story would someday be studied. They never knew their bones would challenge what we believed about ourselves. They never knew that the species spreading around them would eventually look backward and ask, who were they and what happened to them? Maybe that is why their disappearance feels different from other extinctions. When we talk about the lost humans, we are not only talking about ancient creatures from a forgotten age. We are talking about beings who stood incredibly close to us on the tree of life. They looked at the same moon. They walked across the same earth. They faced hunger, danger, and uncertainty just like we do. Their world disappeared, but their existence changed how we understand our own. They remind us that survival was never guaranteed. Out of all the possible versions of humanity that once existed, only one made it to this moment. But being the survivor does not mean the others failed. Every lost human group represents another way humanity adapted, another story written by evolution, and another possibility of what we could have been. The biggest mystery may not be why they disappeared. It may be why we remained. Was it intelligence? Was it cooperation? Was it luck? Or was it a combination of countless small moments that pushed history in one direction instead of another? If things had happened differently thousands of years ago, the world today might not belong only to Homo sapiens. We might have shared our cities with another type of human, another voice, another perspective, another reflection standing beside ours. But history chose a different path. Their chapters ended before they could write their own records, leaving us to uncover the pieces they left behind. Every discovery brings them back from the silence, reminding us that the story of humanity was once much bigger than one species. So the next time you look into a mirror, remember that you are seeing more than just one person. You are looking at the final survivor of an ancient family that almost disappeared from memory. Behind that reflection are millions of years of struggle, adaptation, and lost stories. The other humans are gone, but they were real. They lived. They survived. They mattered. Maybe we are not the heroes who replaced them. Maybe we are simply the last ones carrying the responsibility of remembering them. Because the greatest tragedy is not that they disappeared. The greatest tragedy would be forgetting that they were ever here. We were not always alone on this planet, but now that we are, their story lives through us.